When my cousins called me the poor one at dinner that night, they had no idea I was hiding a $3.2 million secret in my purse. I sat there in my old dress, listening to them brag about their expensive cars and designer watches. They laughed at my beat-up Honda and made jokes about my tiny apartment. They treated me like the family failure, just like they always did. But folded in my purse was a real estate contract that would change everything. Land worth millions that my grandmother had secretly left to me. I could have pulled it out right then and shocked them all into silence. Instead, I kept quiet. Because what I discovered next would blow their minds even more than the money. But why did my grandmother really leave me this fortune? And what was she testing our family for? And how could I have never known that the one person who defended me wasn't just my cousin, but my actual brother? I could feel their eyes on me before I even sat down. The same eyes that had watched me struggle for years. The same eyes that sparkled with cruel amusement every time I showed up to family dinners in my old clothes and worn-out shoes. Aunt Rosalind's dining room looked like something from a fancy magazine. Crystal glasses caught the light from her expensive chandelier. Silver forks and knives were arranged perfectly, beside china plates that probably cost more than my rent. Everything screamed money and success. Everything except me. "Marlo, dear, you can sit there," Aunt Rosalind said, pointing to the chair at the far end of the table. The chair that felt more like a punishment than a seat. The chair where I always sat, separated from the rest of my successful family, like I had some kind of disease they might catch. I smoothed down my simple black dress, the same one I wore to every family gathering because it was the only nice thing I owned, and took my place among the wolves. My cousin Jasper was already showing off his new watch to anyone who would look. The gold caught the light as he waved his hand around, making sure everyone noticed how expensive it was. "This little beauty cost me $8,000, he bragged, his voice loud enough to fill the whole room. "But when you're pulling in 6 figures a year, why not treat yourself?" My stomach twisted. $8,000 would pay my rent for 4 months. But I forced a smile and nodded like I was impressed, even though inside I felt smaller with every word. "That's wonderful, Jasper," I said quietly. Delilah rolled her eyes at her brother, but smiled like she had a secret. "Well, some of us don't need to buy expensive toys to feel important. I just got promoted to senior manager at the law firm. They're giving me a corner office with windows overlooking the city." She paused for dramatic effect, looking around the table to make sure everyone was paying attention. "The salary bump is pretty nice too. I'll be making more in a year than most people make in 3. More nods around the table. More praise for another successful family member. I picked up my water glass just to have something to do with my hands. Uncle Marcus, Jasper and Delilah's father, leaned back in his chair with the satisfied look of a man who had raised winners. "That's my girl. Hard work pays off." "Speaking of hard work," Jasper said, pulling his BMW keys from his pocket and placing them on the table like a trophy. "I just bought my second car. Paid cash, of course. No payments for this guy." The keys sat there gleaming, another symbol of everything I didn't have. My beat-up Honda was parked outside next to their luxury cars like a rusty old dog among show ponies. Cousin Bradley joined, in from across the table. "Nice choice, Jasper. I'm thinking about upgrading my Mercedes next month. Maybe something in red this time." They all laughed like sharing cars was the funniest thing in the world. I tried to laugh too, but it came out sounding forced and fake. That's when the moment I dreaded most arrived. Like sharks smelling blood, they all turned their hungry eyes toward me. "So, Marlo," Aunt Rosalind said with that fake sweet voice she always used when she was about to embarrass me. "What's new with you? Still working at that little office job?" The way she said "little office job" made it sound like I was cleaning toilets for a living. My cheeks burned red, but I nodded anyway. "Yes, I'm still at the insurance company," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's good work." "How nice," Delilah said, not even trying to hide the pity in her voice. She exchanged a look with Jasper that said everything they thought about my good work. "And are you still living in that tiny apartment?" Bradley asked, like he genuinely cared about my living situation. "It's small, but it works for me," I replied, feeling the familiar sting of shame creep up my neck. The truth was so much worse than they knew. I was 3 months behind on rent. My car had been making strange noises for weeks, but I couldn't afford to fix it. I'd been eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner most nights because groceries were a luxury I couldn't manage, but they didn't need to know any of that. They got enough entertainment from what they could see. "Well," Uncle Marcus said, cutting into his expensive steak, "at least you have a job. That's something to be grateful for." "At least I have a job, like I should. Be thankful for the scraps while they feasted on success." Jasper leaned forward with a grin that made my skin crawl. "You know, Marlo, if you ever need career advice, I'd be happy to help. There are lots of opportunities out there for people who are willing to work hard." People who are willing to work hard. As if I wasn't working 45 hours a week just to barely keep my head above water. "That's very kind of you," I managed to say, even though I wanted to throw my water glass at his smug face. "We all started somewhere," Delilah added with false encouragement. "I remember when I was making minimum wage right out of college. Of course, that was only for about 6 months before I got my first real job." 6 months. I'd been struggling for 6 years. The conversation moved on to other topics: vacation, homes, investment portfolios, expensive restaurants. But I barely heard any of it. I was lost in my own thoughts, wondering how I'd become the family charity case, the one they all felt sorry for. That's when Delilah leaned over and whispered, just loud enough for the people around us to hear, "Poor thing. Maybe we should start a collection for her." The table erupted in cruel laughter. Even Aunt Rosalind covered her mouth to hide her giggles. They thought they were being funny, but each laugh felt like a slap across my face. Then Jasper said the CI, words that would haunt me forever. Guess every family needs the poor one, right? Makes the rest of us feel better about our success. More laughter, more cruel, heartless laughter at my expense. Something inside me snapped. My hand moved to my purse almost without thinking. Inside was a folded piece of paper that would change everything. A document that would wipe those smug smiles off their faces forever. I pulled it out, my hands shaking with anger and hurt. The real estate contract felt heavy in my fingers, like it carried the weight of all my hidden secrets. But just as I started to unfold it, something unexpected happened. The front door slammed shut with a bang that echoed through the house. Everyone froze. Aunt Rosalind looked confused. Who could that be? We're all here. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, getting closer and closer to the dining room. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode, because I knew exactly who had just walked into that house. And I knew that everything I'd planned to reveal was about to become much more complicated. Felix walked into the dining room carrying a grocery bag and looking embarrassed. His teacher clothes were wrinkled from a long day at school, and his hair was messy like he'd been running his hands through it. He was the only cousin who ever looked uncomfortable at these fancy family dinners. "Sorry I'm late," he said quietly, setting the bag on the side table. "I brought dessert like you asked, Aunt Rosalind." I quickly folded the real estate contract and shoved it back into my purse. My heart was still racing from almost revealing everything, but Felix's arrival had given me a moment to think. "Felix, dear, you're just in time," Aunt Rosalind said, though her voice sounded annoyed. "We were just hearing about everyone's wonderful achievements." Felix glanced around the table and his eyes landed on me. I could see the sympathy there, the same look he always gave me when the family started their showing off. Unlike the others, Felix never joined in when they made fun of me. "Hi, Marlo," he said with a genuine smile. "How are you doing?" I'm fine, I lied, my voice still shaky from what had almost happened. Felix took the empty seat next to me. The only empty seat left, but also the one closest to the family reject. The others didn't seem to mind. They barely noticed Felix most of the time anyway. "So, Felix," Jasper said, not bothering to look up from his expensive watch. "Still teaching those little kids? What do they pay teachers these days? Like 30,000 a year?" He said it like teaching was something shameful, something only people who couldn't do better would choose. Felix's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "I teach 5th grade, and yes, the pay isn't great, but I love my job." "How noble," Delilah said with fake admiration. "Not everyone can afford to work for love instead of money." I wanted to defend Felix, to tell them that teaching was more important than any of their fancy jobs, but I was still too shaken from almost revealing my secret to speak up. The conversation turned back to money and success stories. I sat there listening to them brag while my mind wandered to 6 months ago, when everything in my life changed forever. I had been sitting in my tiny apartment, surrounded by bills I couldn't pay. The electric company had sent a final notice. My landlord was threatening eviction. I felt like I was drowning, sinking deeper every day with no way to swim to the surface. That's when my phone rang. "Is this Marlo Chen?" the voice had asked. "Yes." "Who's calling?" "This is Attorney Rodriguez from Henderson and Associates. I have some important news about your grandmother's estate." My heart had stopped. Grandma Iris had died 2 years before, and I thought everything had been settled. She had raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 8. She was my whole world, but when she passed, I assumed she'd left everything to my uncle's family, the rich side of the family. "I'm afraid there was an error in the original will reading," Attorney Rodriguez had continued. "Your grandmother left specific instructions in a sealed envelope that was only to be opened after 2 years. She wanted to make sure her final wishes were carried out exactly as she planned." 3 days later, I had sat in the law office, staring at documents that made no sense. "Your grandmother owned 47 acres of undeveloped land outside the city," Attorney Rodriguez had explained. "She bought it quietly over many years, piece by piece. The land is now worth approximately $2.8 million, and she's left it all to you." I couldn't breathe. But why didn't anyone know about this? She was very specific about keeping it secret. She wanted to see how the family treated you after her death. This was her test, and unfortunately, most of them failed. The lawyer had handed me another paper. "There's more. A major shopping center developer wants to buy the land. They're offering $3.2 million. My hands had trembled as I held the purchase contract. I was rich, suddenly, incredibly rich. But Grandma Iris had included one more instruction that made me keep this secret for months. "Marlo?" Felix's voice brought me back to the present. "Are you okay? You look pale." I blinked and realized everyone was staring at me. I had been lost in my memories while they continued their cruel dinner conversation. "I'm fine," I said again, but Felix didn't look convinced. "Maybe you should eat something," he said gently, pushing the bread basket toward me. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. While the others ignored me or made fun of me, Felix actually cared about my well-being. "Thank you," I whispered. Jasper rolled his eyes. "Great! Now we're all going to sit here and watch the poor girl eat bread. This is exactly why family dinners are getting so depressing." "Jasper," Felix said firmly, "that's enough." The table went quiet. Felix never spoke up like that. He was usually the quiet one, the one who tried to avoid conflict. "Excuse me?" Jasper said, his voice dangerous. "I said that's enough. Marlo is our cousin and she deserves respect." Delilah laughed. "Oh, how sweet. The underpaid teacher is defending the underpaid office worker. Maybe you two should start your own little support group for family failures." That's when I felt it again, the anger rising up in my chest like a fire. My hand moved toward my purse, where the contract was hidden. But then Felix did something that stopped me cold. He reached over and took my hand under the table. His touch was warm and steady, and somehow it calmed the storm inside me. "Don't let them get to you," he whispered so quietly that only I could hear. "They're not worth it." But he was wrong about one thing. I wasn't the failure they thought I was. In my purse was proof that I was worth more than all of them combined. I had the power to shock them, to make them meet their cruel words. The question was, should I use it? I looked around the table at their smug faces. Jasper was back to admiring his expensive watch. Delilah was talking about her corner office. Uncle Marcus was nodding proudly at his successful children. Aunt Rosalind was refilling wine glasses and soaking up all the bragging. Then I looked at Felix. Kind, decent Felix who worked with children because he wanted to make a difference. Felix who stood up for me when no one else would. Felix who held my hand when I needed comfort. That's when I remembered the rest of Grandma Iris's instructions, the part that had made me wait 6 months before revealing anything, the part that was going to test not just my family's character, but my own. Because Grandma Iris hadn't just left me money, she had left me a choice, and that choice was going to change everything. But first, I needed to see who my family really was when they thought I had nothing. I needed to watch them show their true colors completely. The contract in my purse felt like it was burning a hole through the leather. Soon, very soon, I would show them what real power looked like. But not tonight. Tonight, I would let them think they had won. Because tomorrow, I had plans that would change all of our lives forever. The next morning, I sat in my tiny apartment holding the letter that had changed everything. The paper was soft from being read so many times, and Grandma Iris's shaky handwriting was faded in places from my tears. But I needed to read it again. I needed to remember why I was putting myself through this torture. My dearest Marlo, if you're reading this, then you've discovered my little secret. I bought this land piece by piece over 30 years, always knowing it would be valuable someday. But more importantly, I wanted to teach our family a lesson about kindness and love. I could almost hear her voice saying the words. Grandma Iris had always been the wise one in our family, the one who saw through people's masks to their true hearts. I've watched how some of our relatives treat you, sweetheart. They think money makes them better than others. They've forgotten that family should lift each other up, not tear each other down. So I'm giving you a choice. A choice. That word had kept me awake for months. You can sell this land and be wealthy, or you can keep it and build something beautiful for families who need help. But before you decide, I want you to wait 6 months. Watch how they treat you when they think you have nothing. See their true hearts. 6 months. It had been exactly 6 months since I got that phone call from Attorney Rodriguez. 6 months of watching my family show me exactly who they really were. Remember, my darling girl, real wealth isn't in your bank account. It's in the love you give and receive. Use this gift wisely. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I picked up the notebook, where I'd been writing down everything that happened during these past 6 months. Page after page of cruel comments, jokes about my old clothes, times when they forgot to invite me to family events, moments when I needed help and they turned away. But I'd also been watching other things. I wrote down how they treated waiters at restaurants, snapping their fingers and complaining about slow service. I noted how they talked about homeless people on the street, making disgusted faces and crossing to the other side. I recorded how Jasper had laughed when he saw a news story about families losing their homes, how Delilah had complained about having to pay taxes that helped poor children get school lunches, how Aunt Rosalind had refused to donate even $5 to help hurricane victims. Every observation proved what Grandma Iris already knew. Money had made them mean. Success had made them selfish. They had forgotten what it meant to care about other people. But the hardest part wasn't watching them be cruel to strangers. The hardest part was staying quiet when they hurt me. 3 months ago, Jasper had seen me at the grocery store using coupons and food stamps. The next family gathering, he'd made jokes about it in front of everyone. Some people just can't manage money, he'd said, looking right at me. Maybe they should teach budgeting classes for people who make poor choices. 2 months ago, Delilah had accidentally posted photos from her birthday party on social media. Everyone in the family was there except me. When I asked her about it later, she'd shrugged and said, "Oh, I thought you'd be too busy working to come anyway." Last month, Uncle Marcus had offered to loan me money for car repairs, but only if I agreed to clean his house every weekend for 6 months. "Nothing's free in this world," he'd said. "People need to earn what they get." Each cruel moment had felt like a knife in my heart, but I'd endured it because I knew Grandma Iris was testing them, and they were failing spectacularly. But I'd also discovered something wonderful during those months, something that gave me hope about what people could be like. My coworker, Mrs. Patterson, had been struggling to pay her mortgage after her husband got sick. Without thinking twice, I'd used my small savings to help her make the payment. The joy and relief on her face had been worth more than any amount of money. When my neighbor's little girl needed school supplies but her mom couldn't afford them, I'd bought them myself, even though it meant eating peanut butter sandwiches for 2 weeks. Every time I helped someone, I felt Grandma Iris's spirit with me. I could almost hear her saying, "That's my girl. That's what real wealth looks like." That's when I knew what I wanted to do with Grandma's gift. I pulled out the folder of plans I'd been working on for months. Drawings of buildings, lists of programs, budgets for helping families. I'd spent countless hours researching and planning, meeting with architects and social workers in secret. The 47 acres could become something amazing. Not a shopping center that would make me even richer, but something that would help people who needed it most. A community center with affordable housing for families who were struggling. Job training programs for people who wanted to work but didn't have the skills. Childcare for parents who couldn't afford to pay someone to watch their kids while they looked for jobs. It would cost about $2.5 million to build everything I'd planned. That would leave me with enough money to live comfortably but not like a millionaire. I would still work, still live simply, but I'd be helping others every day. It was exactly what Grandma Iris would have wanted. But first, I had one more test to conduct. I needed to give my relatives one final chance to show their true character. I picked up my phone and started making calls. "Hi, Jasper, it's Marlo," I said when he answered. "Oh, hey, what's up?" He sounded bored, like talking to me was a waste of his time. "I'm having some problems, and I was wondering if you could give me some advice." I tried to sound scared and desperate. "I got some medical bills that I can't pay, and I don't know what. Toto." There was a long pause. "Medical bills? What's wrong with you?" "It's nothing serious, but the tests were expensive and my insurance didn't cover everything. I'm really worried about what will happen if I can't pay." Another pause. Then, Jasper laughed. "Marlo, this is exactly what I was talking about at dinner. Maybe you should have worked harder in school like the rest of us. Maybe you should have gotten a better job with better insurance." My heart sank, but I wasn't surprised. "So you don't have any advice?" "Yeah, I have advice. Figure it out yourself. That's what responsible adults do." He hung up on me. I called Delilah next. Her response was just as cruel. "I'm sure you'll figure it out, Marlo. I can't really help right now because I'm saving for a vacation to Europe. Maybe this will teach you to be more responsible with money." Uncle Marcus was even worse. "This is exactly why people need to make better choices in life. I hope this teaches you a lesson about planning for the future." Not one of them offered to help. Not one of them showed any concern for my well-being. But then something unexpected happened. An hour after I'd called everyone, my phone rang. "Marlo, it's Felix. I heard you're having some trouble with medical bills." My heart stopped. "How did you hear about that?" "Jasper mentioned it to my dad, and Dad told me. Listen, I don't have much money, but I have about $500 in my emergency fund. If you need it for medical bills, it's yours." I almost started crying right there on the phone. Here was Felix, who made a teacher's salary and lived paycheck to paycheck, offering to help me when the wealthy relatives wouldn't lift a finger. "Felix, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. We're family. Family helps each other." That's when I made my final decision about Grandma Iris's gift, and I knew exactly who I wanted to share it with. But first, I had one more family dinner to get through. One more chance to see if any of them would surprise me. Somehow, I doubted they would. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into planning what would become the most important project of my life. Every evening after work, I met with architects, city planners, and social workers. Every weekend, I visited other community centers to see what worked and what didn't. The folder on my kitchen table grew thicker each day with drawings, budgets, and program ideas. I was building something that would help hundreds of families, and for the first time in months, I felt truly excited about the future. "This is incredible," said Sarah, the social worker I'd been working with. She spread the architectural plans across the conference table at her office. A community center with affordable housing units built right above it. Families could live upstairs and access job training, childcare, and counseling services downstairs. I pointed to different sections of the building plans. The first floor would have the childcare center here, job training classrooms there, and a food bank in the back. The second and third floors would be small apartments for families who are getting back on their feet. "And this outdoor space?" Sarah asked, tracing her finger along the green area on the plans. "A playground for the kids and a community garden where families can grow their own food. My parents used to say that growing your own vegetables teaches you patience and hope." Sarah smiled. "Your parents sound like they were wise people." "They were. They died when I was young, but my grandmother raised me with the same values. She always said that helping others was the best way to honor their memory." We spent 3 hours going over every detail. The center would have space for after-school programs, computer classes for adults, and support groups for people dealing with difficult times. There would be a small clinic where families could get basic medical care, and a legal aid office to help people with problems they couldn't solve alone. "How many families do you think we could help each year?" I asked. Sarah did some quick math in her head. "With 30 affordable housing units and all these programs, I'd guess we could directly help about 200 families annually. But the ripple effect would be much bigger. Kids who get tutoring help will do better in school. Parents who learn job skills will find better work. The impact could reach thousands of people." Thousands of people. The number took my breath away. "The project would cost about $2.5 million to build," I told her. "That would leave me with enough money to live comfortably but not extravagantly. I'd still work, still live simply, but I'd be helping others every day." "You'd really give up being a millionaire to do this?" Sarah asked, looking amazed. "Money isn't worth much if you're the only one who has it," I said. "My grandmother taught me that real wealth comes from lifting others up, not putting them down." The next week, I met with the city planning department to make sure my project would be approved. The meeting went better than I'd hoped. "We've been looking for someone to develop that area for years," said Mrs. Kim, the head planner. "A community center would be perfect for that neighborhood. There are a lot of families there who need exactly the kind of help you're proposing." "How long would the approval process take?" I asked. "For a project like this, probably about 3 months. But I don't see any major obstacles. The city wants more affordable housing and community services." 3 months. In 3 months, I could break ground on something that would change people's lives forever. But first, I had to deal with my family. I had to show them what real character looked like. That evening, I called Felix. After his offer to help with my fake medical bills, I knew he was different from the others. I knew I could trust him with the truth. "Felix, could we meet for coffee tomorrow? There's something important I need to tell you." "Of course," he said immediately. "Is everything okay? Are you still worried about those medical bills?" My heart ached at the genuine concern in his voice. "The medical bills are fine, but there's something else, something big." We met at a small cafe near his school. Felix looked tired after a long day of teaching, but his eyes were bright with curiosity. "What's going on, Marlo? You sounded mysterious on the phone." I took a deep breath. This was the first time I'd told anyone in my family the truth. "Felix, what would you say if I told you that I'm not actually poor? What would you say if I told you that I inherited something from Grandma Iris that's worth over $3 million? Felix nearly choked on his coffee. "What? That's impossible. Grandma didn't have that kind of money." I pulled out the letter from Attorney Rodriguez and slid it across the table. Felix read it slowly, his eyes getting wider with each line. 47 acres? $3.2 million? He looked up at me in shock. "Marlo? This is real?" "It's real. But there's more." I showed him Grandma Iris's letter and explained about the 6-month test. I told him about the cruel things our relatives had said and done. I showed him plans for the community center. When I finished talking, Felix sat back in his chair, completely stunned. "So for 6 months, you've been letting them treat you terribly while you planned to give away millions of dollars to help other people?" "Yes. And you're telling me because you're the only one in our family who offered to help when you thought I was in trouble. You're the only one who treats people with kindness regardless of how much money they have." Felix was quiet for a long time, staring at the building plans I'd spread across the table. "This community center," he said finally. "It's amazing. It could really help people. I want you to help me run it, Felix. I want you to be part of making this dream come true." His eyes filled with tears. "Marlo, I don't know what to say. This is incredible. But are you sure you want to give up being wealthy?" "I'm not giving up being wealthy," I said. "I'm choosing a different kind of wealth. The kind Grandma Iris taught me about." Felix reached across the table and took my hand. "When do we start?" "Soon," I said. "But first, I have one more family dinner to attend. One more chance to see if any of them will surprise me. And if they don't?" I smiled. "Then I show them the contract and watch their faces when they realize that the poor-own is actually the richest person in the room." Felix grinned back. "I almost feel sorry for them. Almost." "Don't feel too sorry. They're about to learn the most important lesson of their lives, which is that real wealth isn't about what you own. It's about what you give away." As we walked out of the cafe together, I felt lighter than I had in months. Soon, the 6-month test would be over. Soon, I would reveal the truth to my cruel relatives and show them what their greed had cost them. But most importantly, soon, I would start building something beautiful on the land where my parents had once fallen in love. Something that would honor their memory and Grandma Iris's wisdom. Something that would prove that kindness was worth more than money. The family dinner was in 3 days. I could hardly wait. 3 days later, I sat in Aunt Rosalind's dining room again, but this time, everything felt different. The same crystal glasses caught the light from the expensive chandelier. The same silver forks and knives were arranged, perfectly beside china plates. But I wasn't the same scared, ashamed person who had sat here just weeks ago. This time, I had power. The real estate contract was folded carefully in my purse, along with Grandma Iris's letter and the building. Plans for the community center. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't pounding with fear. Instead, I felt calm and ready. Felix caught my eye from across the table and gave me a small nod. He knew what was coming. We'd practiced what I would say and how I would handle their reactions. He was the only ally I had in this room full of wolves. "So," Jasper said, already showing off his newest expensive toy, a gold pen that he claimed cost more than most people made in a month. "I just closed the biggest deal of my career. The commission alone will pay for my vacation house in Florida." "How wonderful," Delilah said with fake enthusiasm. "Some of us prefer to invest our money in more practical things, like my new car. It's a Mercedes, of course. I picked it up yesterday." The bragging continued as usual. Uncle Marcus talked about his stock portfolio. Aunt Rosalind mentioned her plans to remodel the kitchen with imported marble. Bradley showed pictures of his expensive new golf clubs. They were all so busy trying to impress each other that they barely noticed I was there. Which was perfect. It would make the surprise even better. "And what about you, Marlo?" Aunt Rosalind asked eventually, turning to me with that familiar fake sweet voice. "Any exciting news to share?" This was it, the moment I'd been waiting, for I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room focus on me. "Actually, yes, I do have some news." "Oh?" Delilah raised an eyebrow. "Did you finally get a promotion at that little office job?" "No," I said calmly. "It's much bigger than that." I reached into my purse and pulled out the real estate contract. The paper felt heavy in my hands, weighted with the power to change everything. "This," I said, placing it on the table in front of me, "is a contract for 47 acres of land that Grandma Iris left to me in her will." The room went completely silent. Jasper's expensive pen stopped clicking. Delilah's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. "That's impossible," Uncle Marcus said, his voice sharp. "We went through Grandma's will 2 years ago. There was no land." I unfolded the contract and spread it across the table. She bought it secretly over 30 years, piece by piece, always planning ahead. The land is worth $3.2 million. The silence stretched on forever. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. I could hear Aunt Rosalind's shallow breathing. I could see the shock and confusion written across their faces. $3.2 million, Jasper whispered. "That's right," I said. "A major shopping center developer wants to buy it. All I have to do is sign this contract and I'll be rich, richer than any of you." Delilah's mouth fell open. But you're the poor one. You can barely pay your rent." "I've been pretending to be poor," I said. "For 6 months, I've been watching how you treat me when you think I have nothing, and you've all failed the test spectacularly." I pulled out Grandma Iris's letter and read parts of it aloud. "Watch how they treat you when they think you have nothing. See their true hearts." "She was testing us," Aunt Rosalind asked, her voice barely audible. "She was testing all of you, and every single one of you proved that you only care about money and status. Every single one of you showed that you have no kindness or compassion for family members who are struggling." I looked around the table at their stunned faces. 2 weeks ago, I called each of you and told you I needed help with medical bills. Do you remember what you said? Jasper's face went pale. He remembered. "You told me I should have worked harder in school. You told me I should have made better choices. You told me to figure it out myself." My voice got stronger with each word. "Not one of you offered to help. Not one of you showed any concern for my well-being." "But we didn't know you were really in trouble," Delilah protested weakly. "Exactly," I said. "You didn't care enough to find out. You just assumed I deserved whatever problems I was having." Uncle Marcus leaned forward, his eyes getting calculating. "Marlo, sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Of course we care about you. We're family." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Now you care about me? Now that you know I have money, suddenly I'm worth caring about." "That's not fair," Aunt Rosalind said, but her voice sounded hollow. "What's not fair," I said, "is how you've treated me for years, making jokes about my clothes, my job, my car, calling me the poor one, like it was funny, excluding me from family events because I couldn't afford to chip in for expensive gifts." I pulled out another document, the building plans for the community center. "But here's the really interesting part," I continued. "I'm not keeping this money." Their faces went from shocked to confused. "What do you mean?" Jasper asked. "I'm using it to build a community center with affordable housing, job training programs, and support services for families in need. It's going to help hundreds of people every year. You're giving away millions of dollars?" Delilah looked like she might faint. "I'm investing it in something that matters, something that will help people instead of just buying more expensive watches and cars." That's when Felix spoke up. "And I'm going to help her run it." All eyes turned to him. I saw the exact moment they realized that Felix had known about this. "All along." "You told him before us?" Uncle Marcus demanded. "I told him because he's the only one in this family who offered to help when he thought I was in trouble. He's the only one who treats people with kindness regardless of how much money they have." Felix smiled at me. "It's going to be amazing, Marlo. We're going to change so many lives." But I wasn't finished yet. I had one more surprise that would shock them even more. "There's something else," I said, reaching into my purse one more time. "Grandma Iris left letters for each of you, too." I pulled out the sealed envelopes with their names written in Grandma's shaky handwriting. "She wrote these before she died, but instructed that they only be given to you after I revealed the land inheritance." One by one, I handed them their letters. One by one, they opened them with trembling hands. As they read, I watched their faces change. Shock turned to shame. Shame turned to understanding. Some of them started crying. But the biggest surprise was still coming. Because Grandma Iris had planned one final twist that even I didn't know about until this moment. Jasper was the first to finish reading his letter. His face had gone completely white, and his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the paper. She knew everything. Every mean thing I ever said about you. Every cruel joke I made. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Marlo, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I never thought about how my words made you feel." Delilah was crying as she read her letter. She says I became everything she hoped I wouldn't become. Arrogant and selfish and mean. She wiped her eyes with her napkin. "She's right. I've been horrible to you." Uncle Marcus had stopped reading halfway through his letter. He folded it quickly and stared at the table, his face red with shame. Aunt Rosalind's letter was apparently the harshest. She read it twice, then set it down without saying a word. But I could see tears running down her cheeks. But then Felix opened his letter, and his reaction was completely different. Instead of shame or tears, he smiled. A real, genuine smile that lit up his whole face. "What does yours say?" I asked gently. "She says she's proud of me," Felix said, his voice full of wonder. "She says she always knew I was different from the others. She hoped that someday you and I would work together to help people." "That's beautiful," I whispered. "But there's more," Felix continued reading. She says, "Oh my goodness. Marlo, listen to this." He read directly from the letter. "Felix, my dear boy, if you're reading this, then Marlo has revealed the truth about the land. But I have one more surprise that will shock everyone, including Marlo herself. Look in the envelope for the second document." Felix reached into his envelope and pulled out another folded paper. As he opened it, his eyes went wide. "What is it?" I asked. Felix looked at me with complete amazement. It's a deed to another piece of property. Grandma Iris left me 20 acres of land right next to yours. The room erupted in gasps and confused voices. I stared at Felix in shock. That's impossible. Attorney Rodriguez never mentioned any other property. Look, Felix said, showing me the deed. It's all legal and official. 20 acres, worth about $1 million, and there's a note attached. He unfolded a small piece of paper and read aloud. This land is for Felix, because he proved that kindness matters more than money. He can sell it and be wealthy, or he can join Marlowe in building something beautiful for people in need. The choice is his. I couldn't breathe. Grandma Iris had planned this too. She'd been testing Felix just like she'd been testing me. There's more, Felix said, still reading. I've been watching our family for years, and I've seen two different paths. Some choose greed and cruelty. Others choose kindness and service. Felix and Marlowe have chosen the right path, and they should be rewarded for their good hearts. Jasper leaned forward, his voice desperate. Felix, that's incredible. You're a millionaire now. You can quit teaching and buy whatever you want. But Felix wasn't looking at Jasper. He was looking at me, and I could see the decision in his eyes before he even spoke. I don't want to sell it, he said firmly. I want to use it for the community center too. We could make it even bigger, help even more families. My heart felt like it might burst with joy and gratitude. Felix, are you sure? That's $1 million you'd be giving up. I'm not giving up anything, he said, echoing my own words from days earlier. I'm choosing the kind of wealth that actually matters. But then something even more unexpected happened. Delilah spoke up through her tears. Is there any way I could help too? Everyone turned to stare at her. She was crying harder now, clutching her letter from Grandma Iris. I mean it, she said. Reading this letter, seeing what I've become. I hate myself right now. I want to be better. I want to help people instead of just caring about money. Jasper nodded eagerly. Me too. God, Marlowe, I've been such a terrible person. Such a terrible Cassin. Is there any way I can make it up to you? Even Uncle Marcus looked up from his letter. I'd like to help with the community center too, if you'll have me. I have construction experience. I could help with the building. I looked around the table at their faces. These were the same people who had mocked me and called me the poor one just an hour ago. Now they were begging to help with my project, but Aunt Rosalind finally spoke, and her voice was cold and angry. This is ridiculous, she said. You're all acting like children who got caught doing something wrong. Marlowe doesn't need our help. She's made it very clear that she thinks she's better than all of us. That's not true, I said quietly. Isn't it? Aunt Rosalind stood up, her face red with anger. You've been lying to us for months, pretending to be poor while you planned this whole dramatic scene. You wanted to humiliate us. I wanted to see who you really were, I replied. And you showed me. We're your family, she shouted. We deserve better than this. Do you? I asked calmly. Do you deserve better treatment than you gave me? The room went silent again. Aunt Rosalind looked around the table for support, but everyone else was staring at their hands or their letters. Fine, she said finally. Keep your money and your judgment. I don't need either. She stormed out of the dining room, and we heard the front door slam a few minutes later. The rest of us sat in uncomfortable silence until Felix spoke up. Should we go after her? He asked. I shook my head. She needs time to think. Maybe someday she'll understand what Grandma Iris was trying to teach us. And what was that? Jasper asked quietly. I looked around the table at my cousins, some ashamed, some hopeful, all of them changed by this evening. That money doesn't make you a good person, I said. Kindness does. Helping others does. caring about people who have less than you do. So what happens now? Delilah asked. I thought about it for a moment. These people had hurt me deeply over the years. They'd made them feel worthless and small, but they were also family, and Grandma Iris had believed that people could change. Now, I said, we find out if you really want to help, or if you're just feeling guilty because you got caught being cruel. How do we prove it? Uncle Marcus asked. I pulled out the building plans for the community center and spread them across the table. The center needs volunteers, I said. People who will work with families who are struggling. People who will tutor kids after school, help adults learn job skills, serve food to people who are hungry. It's not glamorous work, and it doesn't pay anything. I looked each of them in the eye. If you really want to make up for how you've treated me, then prove it. Volunteer your time. Use your skills to help people who need it. Show me that you can care about something other than money. For how long? Jasper asked. For as long as it takes, I said. For as long as it takes to become the kind of people Grandma Iris wanted you to be. Felix smiled and took my hand. I think she would be proud of this conversation. I hope so, I said, because we're about to find out if her faith in this family was justified. But even as I said those words, I had a feeling that Grandma Iris had one more surprise waiting for us. Something that would test us all in ways we couldn't imagine. 3 weeks later, I sat in the community center construction office, watching something I never thought I'd see. Jasper was on his hands and knees, helping install flooring in what would become the childcare center. His expensive suits had been replaced with work clothes, and his perfectly styled hair was messy with dust. Hand me that hammer, he called to Delilah, who was painting walls nearby. Which one? She asked, looking at the tool table with confusion. 6 months ago, Delilah wouldn't have known a hammer from a screwdriver. Now she was learning construction basics, so she could help build the center. The one with the blue handle, Uncle Marcus said patiently. He'd become the unofficial construction supervisor, using his building experience to teach the others. And remember to tap gently. We don't want to damage the boards. I couldn't help but smile. It had been 3 weeks since the dinner table. Confrontation, and my cousins had shown up every day to help. Not just for an hour or two, but for full days of hard work. Felix walked over and sat beside me, wiping sweat from his forehead. They're really doing it, aren't they? They're actually changing. It looks that way, I said. But I keep waiting for them to get bored and quit. Maybe they won't. Maybe Grandma. Iris was right about people being able to change their hearts. That's when my phone rang. It was Attorney Rodriguez. Marlo, I need you to come to my office immediately. There's been a development with your grandmother's estate. What kind of development? I asked, suddenly worried. I can't discuss it over the phone, but bring Felix with you. He needs to hear this too. An hour later, Felix and I sat across from Attorney Rodriguez's desk, staring at yet another document that would change everything. This was sealed with specific instructions, the lawyer explained. It was only to be opened if both you and Felix chose to use your inherited land for helping others instead of personal wealth. The document was thick, with official seals and signatures. As I read it, my hands started shaking. This says that Grandma Iris had more property, I said slowly. Much more. She owned an additional 200 acres surrounding your land. Attorney Rodriguez confirmed. Plus several buildings in the city that generate rental income and a trust fund worth approximately $8 million. Felix's jaw dropped. $8 million? The total estate value is roughly $15 million, the lawyer continued. And according to this document, it's all yours now. Both of yours, to be shared equally. I couldn't breathe. But why didn't she tell us about this before? Because this was her final test. She wanted to see if you would choose to help others even when you thought you only had enough money for one community center. She wanted to know if your hearts were truly generous, or if you were just being generous with a small portion of your wealth. Felix leaned forward. So now we have enough money to build multiple community centers? You have enough money to change thousands of lives, Attorney Rodriguez said. The question is, what will you do with it? I looked at the papers spread across his desk. $15 million. I could buy anything he wanted, travel anywhere, live like a queen for the rest of my life. But then I thought about the families who were already signed up to live in our community center. I thought about the children who would get tutoring help, the parents who would learn job skills, the elderly people who would have a safe place to gather and make friends. We build more centers, I said without hesitation. We build as many as we can. Felix nodded eagerly. We could have one in every part of the city, maybe even in other cities. There's one more thing, Attorney Rodriguez said. He handed me another envelope. This was also to be given to you only after you made your choice about the $15 million. Inside was another letter from Grandma Iris, this one longer than all the others. My dearest Marlo and Felix, if you're reading this, then you've passed every test I could think. You've chosen kindness over cruelty, service over selfishness, and love over money. I've been planning this for years, watching our family and hoping that someone would remember what really matters. You two have given me hope that our family legacy will be one of helping others, not just accumulating wealth. But now comes your biggest choice. With $15 million, you could build an empire of community centers. You could help tens of thousands of families. Or you could keep some of the money for yourselves and live comfortably while still helping others. I won't tell you what to do. You've proven that your hearts are in the right place. Trust those hearts to guide you. There's one more thing you should know. The other family members who have been working at the community center, if they continue volunteering for 1 full year, they will each receive a portion of the estate as well. Not millions, but enough to make their lives comfortable. This is their chance to earn back their place in the family through service, not through birthright. They can choose to be wealthy through helping others, or they can choose to remain as they were. I love you both, and I'm proud of the people you've become. Use this gift wisely. Felix and I stared at each other in amazement. She's still testing them, Felix said quietly. Even now, she's giving them a chance to prove they've really changed. Should we tell them? I asked. Not yet, Felix said. Let them work because they want to, not because they think they'll get money for it. I nodded. That was the right choice. Over the next month, construction on the community center moved faster than anyone expected. Not just because of professional workers, but because my cousins showed up every single day. Jasper learned plumbing and electrical work. Delilah organized volunteer schedules and supply deliveries. Uncle Marcus taught construction skills to anyone who wanted to learn. Even some of their friends started helping. People who had never done volunteer work in their lives were painting walls and installing windows. I never knew how good it felt to build something for other people, Jasper told me one afternoon. We were taking a break from installing kitchen cabinets in the affordable housing units. It's different from making money, isn't it? I said. Completely different. When I close a business deal, I feel successful for maybe an hour. But working on something that will help families for years, it feels important. Delilah overheard us talking. I keep thinking about the kids who will live here, she said. Kids who might not have a safe place to do homework or play outside. We're giving them that. And their parents will have job training and childcare, Uncle Marcus added. Some of these families might completely change their lives because of what we're building. I looked around at the progress we'd made. The community center was beautiful, with bright colors and big windows that let in lots of sunlight. The affordable housing units were small but comfortable, designed to help families save money while they got back on their feet. You know what the best part is? Felix said, joining our conversation. What? Delilah asked. We're not just building a center. We're building a new kind of family. One that actually takes care of each other. He was right. Working side by side every day, my cousins and I had started talking to each other differently. We shared lunches and laughed at jokes and helped each other when tasks got difficult. For the first time in my life, family dinners were actually enjoyable. But I knew that the real test was still coming. When the center opened and real families moved in, would my cousins continue showing up? When the work got harder and less exciting, would they stick around? In 2 weeks, we would find out. The community center was almost ready, and the first families were scheduled to move in. That's when we would discover if this change in my family was real, or if it was just temporary. Guilt that would fade away. 2 weeks later, the Iris Chen Community Center officially opened its doors. I stood in the main lobby, watching families carry boxes and suitcases into their new apartments upstairs. Children ran around exploring while their parents filled out paperwork for job training programs. It was everything I had dreamed it would be, and more. Mrs. Chen? A young woman approached me, holding the hand of a little girl who looked about 6 years old. I'm Maria Santos. We're moving into apartment 2B today. Welcome to your new home, I said, kneeling down to smile at the little girl. What's your name, sweetheart? I'm Sophia, the girl said shyly. Is it true that there's a playground here? There is. Would you like me to show you? Sophia nodded eagerly, and I led her family outside to the playground we'd built. Other children were already playing on the swings and climbing structures. Their laughter filled the air like music. This is amazing, Maria said, tears in her eyes. Sophia hasn't had a safe place to play in 2 years. We've been living in my sister's basement since my husband lost his job. Well, now you have a place to call home while you get back on your feet, I said. And if you're interested, we have childcare during the day and after-school programs for Sophia. That would be wonderful. I start job training next week, learning computer skills. As I walked back inside, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what Grandma Iris had wanted. This was what real wealth looked like. But then I noticed something that made my heart sink. Jasper was supposed to be helping with move-in day, but he was nowhere to be seen. Neither was Delilah. Uncle Marcus was here, helping carry furniture, but he kept checking his phone and looking distracted. Felix found me an hour later, looking worried. Have you seen Jasper or Delilah? He asked. No, they were supposed to be here at 8 this morning. Jasper texted me that he had to work, some big business deal that couldn't wait, and Delilah said she had a court case that was more important. My stomach dropped. More important than opening day? That's what I thought too. Over the next few days, the pattern became clear. Now that the exciting construction work was done, my cousins were finding excuses to avoid the daily tasks of running a community center. Helping families fill out paperwork wasn't as fun as building walls. Tutoring kids with their homework wasn't as exciting as installing windows. Serving meals in the food bank wasn't as satisfying as painting bright murals. By the end of the first week, only Uncle Marcus was still showing up regularly. Jasper came by twice but spent most of his time taking phone calls about his business deals. Delilah stopped by once, complained that the work was boring, and left early. I'm sorry, Marlo, Uncle Marcus said as we organized supplies in the food bank. I tried to talk to them, but they said they've done their part by helping with construction. It's okay, I said, but inside I was disappointed. I'd really hoped they had changed. No, it's not okay, he said firmly. We made a commitment to help, and they're breaking that commitment. I'm embarrassed by my own children. That evening, Felix and I sat in my office looking over the volunteer schedules. Maybe we expected too much too fast, Felix said gently. Maybe, I agreed. But Grandma Iris believed people could change their hearts completely, not just temporarily. Some people can. Look at your uncle. He's been here every day working harder than anyone. That was true. Uncle Marcus had thrown himself into the community center work with genuine enthusiasm. He'd started a woodworking program for teenagers and was teaching them how to build furniture for their apartments. "And look at you," Felix continued. "A year ago, you were struggling to pay rent. Now you're running a community center that's changing lives every day." He was right. In just the first week, we'd helped 12 families find new apartments, enrolled 8 adults in job training programs, and provided after-school care for 23 children. But the absence of Jasper and Delilah still hurt. That's when my phone rang. It was Attorney Rodriguez again. "Marlo, I have a question about your grandmother's final instructions. It's been 6 months since the family learned about the inheritance. Should I proceed with distributing the additional funds to family members who've been volunteering?" I thought about it. Uncle Marcus had definitely earned his portion through months of dedicated service, but Jasper and Delilah had quit as soon as the work became routine. "Uncle Marcus deserves his share," I said, "but I'm not sure about the others. Your grandmother's instructions were very specific. 1 full year of consistent volunteer service, no exceptions." "Then we wait," I said. "We see who's still here in 6 more months." The next week brought a surprise visitor. Aunt Rosalind walked into the community center on a Tuesday morning, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I'd like to speak with you, Marlo," she said quietly. We sat in my office while Felix continued running the morning programs. "I've been thinking about that. Dinner," Aunt Rosalind said, "about the things I said and the way I acted." "Okay," I said, waiting for her to continue. I was angry because I felt judged, but the truth is, I judged myself when I read Grandma's letter. She was right about the person I'd become. Aunt Rosalind looked around the office, taking in the photos of families we'd helped and children we'd tutored. "I want to help," she said. "I know I stormed out and said awful things, but I want to try to be better." "What kind of help did you have in mind?" "I used to be a teacher before I married your uncle. I could help with the tutoring programs, and I'm a good cook. Maybe I could help with the meal programs for seniors." I studied her face, looking for signs that this was just another temporary guilt response, but she seemed genuinely sincere. "The work isn't glamorous," I warned her. "It's not exciting like the construction was. It's showing up every day to help people with small problems and basic needs." "I understand," she said. "I want to do work that matters, not just work that makes me feel important." "Then welcome to the team," I said. Over the following months, a strange thing happened. Aunt Rosalind became one of our most dedicated volunteers. She started a cooking program for seniors that became so popular we had to expand it. She tutored kids every afternoon and became a grandmother figure to dozens of children. But Jasper and Delilah continued to drift away. They'd show up for big events when they could take photos and post them on social media, but they weren't interested in the daily work of helping people. 8 months after the community center opened, we had our answer about who had really changed and who had just been feeling temporary guilt. Uncle Marcus and Aunt Rosalind were there every day, finding joy in service and building real relationships with the families we helped. Jasper and Delilah had returned to their old lives of caring more about money and status than about helping others. "I'm proud of my parents," Felix told me one evening as we watched Uncle Marcus teach a teenager how to use a power saw safely. They found their way back to being good people. "And your siblings?" I asked. Felix shrugged sadly. "Maybe someday they'll understand what they're missing, but at least we know who we can count on." As I looked around the community center that night, seeing families cooking dinner together in the shared kitchen and kids doing homework with volunteer tutors, I realized something important. Grandma Iris's plan had worked perfectly. She'd separated the family members who could truly change from those who were only capable of temporary improvement. And the ones who had really changed were building something beautiful together. 1 year after the community center opened, I received another letter from Attorney Rodriguez. This was sealed with instructions to give it to you exactly 1 year after the center's opening, he explained when I came to his office. Inside was the final letter from Grandma Iris, written in her familiar, shaky handwriting. My dearest Marlo, if you're reading this, then my plan worked perfectly. You've opened the community center and I hope it's everything I dreamed it would be. But there's something I never told you about the land. When I bought those 47 acres 30 years ago, I wasn't just thinking about the money. I was thinking about you. I paused, my heart starting to race. What did she mean? You see, that land is special. It's where your parents met. They were both volunteering at a community garden that used to be there. Your father was teaching kids about plants, and your mother was helping families learn to grow their own food. Tears began streaming down my face. I had no idea. When they died, I bought every piece of that land to preserve it. I always planned to give it to you, not just because you needed financial security, but because I knew you would understand its true value. Your parents would be so proud of what you've built there. You've brought their spirit of service back to the place where their love story began. I was sobbing by the time I finished reading. Felix, who had come with me to the lawyer's office, was crying too. She planned all of this, he whispered. Every single part of it. There's more, I said, pointing to the bottom of the page. P.S. I have one more surprise for you. Check with Attorney Rodriguez about the additional documents in my estate. I think you'll find something interesting about your family's history. Attorney Rodriguez smiled mysteriously as he handed me a thick folder. Your grandmother was quite the record keeper, he said. These are documents about your family's history that she wanted you to have after everything else was settled. Inside the folder were old photographs, letters, and legal documents going back over 100 years. As I looked through them, I discovered something incredible about my family's past. The first photograph showed a young woman standing in front of a small house, holding a baby. On the back, someone had written, Great-great-grandmother Chen, 1890, first home in America. Look at this, Felix said, holding up an old newspaper clipping. It's about your great-great-grandmother. She started a soup kitchen during the Great Depression, feeding hundreds of families every day. More photographs showed family members, throughout the decades, always helping others. Building homes for families who lost everything in floods. Teaching immigrant children how to read English. Organizing food drives during wars. Your family has been helping people for generations, Felix said in wonder. But then I found a document that explained everything. It was a family tree with notes written beside each name. Great-great-grandmother Chen fed the hungry during hard times. Great-grandmother Chen built houses for families in need. Grandmother Chen taught children to read. My grandfather donated land for the first public library in town. But beside some names, there were different notes. Uncle Marcus's father forgot the family mission, focused only on making money. Aunt Rosalind's father chose greed over generosity. At the bottom of the family tree, Grandma Iris had written a note. Our family started with the mission to help others. Somewhere along the way, some branches forgot this purpose and became obsessed with accumulating wealth. I spent my life trying to bring our family back to its roots. The land, the money, the community center, it was all about remembering what really matters. Marlo and Felix represent the best of our family's traditions. Uncle Marcus and Aunt Rosalind found their way back to those values through service. But some family members chose money over love, and they lost their place in our true legacy. Looked up at Felix, understanding finally hitting me. This wasn't just about teaching us lessons. This was about saving our family's soul. She was trying to fix what had gone wrong over the decades, Felix agreed. trying to bring us back to helping people instead of just helping ourselves. The lawyer handed me one more envelope. This contains the final distribution of your grandmother's estate. Inside were checks for Uncle Marcus and Aunt Rosalind, each for $200,000. There was also a note. These funds are for Marcus and Rosalind, who proved that people can change their hearts through service to others. Use this money wisely, and remember that true wealth comes from helping people, not from collecting things. What about Jasper and Delilah? Felix asked. I looked through the envelope again, but there was nothing for them. They failed the test, I said quietly. They chose their old lives over the family mission. That evening, we called Uncle Marcus and Aunt Rosalind to the community center. When I handed them their checks, they both stared in shock. $200,000, Uncle Marcus whispered. Grandma? Iris left instructions that this money should go to family members who proved they could change through service, I explained. But we didn't volunteer to get money, Aunt Rosalind said. We volunteered because it felt right. That's exactly why you earned it, Felix said. Uncle Marcus folded his check and put it in his pocket without another glance. You know what I'm going to do with this? What? I asked. I'm going to donate half of it to the community center and use the other half to start a scholarship fund for kids who want to learn construction trades. Aunt Rosalind nodded. I want to use mine to expand the senior meal program. Maybe we can serve lunch and dinner instead of just lunch. I smiled through my tears. They had truly learned what Grandma Iris was trying to teach. The next week, I received angry phone calls from Jasper and Delilah. Somehow they'd heard about the money their parents received. This isn't fair, Delilah shouted over the phone. We helped build the community center too. You helped for a few weeks, then quit when the work became routine, I replied calmly. We had jobs to do. We had responsibilities. So did your parents. But they chose to make time for service anyway. Jasper called later, his voice desperate. Marlo, surely there's some way I can still earn a portion of the inheritance. I'll volunteer. Now I'll do whatever you want. It's too late, Jasper. The test is over. But family should stick together. You're right, I said. Family should stick together. They should help each other and lift each other up. Where was that attitude when you called me the poor one and made fun of my struggles? He hung up on me. 2 years later, our community center had helped over 500 families find stable housing and good jobs. We'd tutored more than 1,000 children and served over 50,000 meals to people in need. Uncle Marcus had become the director of our job training programs. Aunt Rosalind ran the senior services and had become beloved by everyone she helped. Felix and I managed the overall operations and had started planning 2 more community centers in other parts of Thessaly. Most importantly, we'd restored our family's true legacy. We weren't just wealthy people who happened to help others occasionally. We were people whose wealth came from serving others every day. On the 2nd anniversary of the community center's opening, I stood in the same spot where my parents had met decades earlier. The community garden they'd tended was gone, but in its place was something even more beautiful, a place where hundreds of families were building better lives. I think your parents would be proud, Felix said, joining me in the garden area we'd created behind the main building. I think Grandma Iris would be proud too, I replied. She saved our family from becoming completely selfish and greedy. Some of us, anyway, Felix said sadly. I thought about Jasper and Delilah, who had chosen money over love and lost their place in our family's true legacy. I felt sorry for them, but I wasn't angry anymore. Grandma Iris gave everyone a choice, I said. Some people chose wisely and some didn't. But the ones who chose love over money built something beautiful together. As we walked back toward the community center, I could hear children laughing in the playground and see families cooking dinner together in the shared kitchen. This was what real wealth looked like. This was what Grandma Iris had always known. Money could buy things, but only love could build a life worth living. 3 years after the community center opened, I received one final call from Attorney Rodriguez. "There's one last envelope from your grandmother's estate," he said. "This one was sealed with instructions to give it to you on the 3rd anniversary of the center's opening." Felix and I sat in the lawyer's office, wondering what possible surprises could be left. We thought we'd discovered everything about Grandma Iris's plan. But this envelope was different. It was thicker than the others, and when I opened it, I found documents that made my heart stop. The first was a birth certificate. Mine. But there was something different about it. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Under father's name, it didn't list the man I'd always believed was my father. The letter that came with it explained everything. "My precious Marlowe, this is the hardest letter I've ever had to write. The man you knew as your father was actually your stepfather. He adopted you when you were a baby and loved you as his own child, which is why we never told you the truth. Your biological father is someone you know, someone who has been part of your life all along, but who made a mistake when he was young and has been trying to make up for it ever since. Felix is your half-brother. His father is also your father." I dropped the letter and stared at Felix, who was reading over my shoulder. His face went completely white. "That's impossible," he whispered. But as I looked at him, really looked at him, I could suddenly see the resemblance. We had the same eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same way of tilting our heads when we were thinking. How had I never noticed before? The letter continued. Felix's father made a mistake when he was 19. He got a girl pregnant and was too scared to tell his parents. The girl, your biological mother, decided to give you up for adoption. But then she met your stepfather, who was willing to marry her and raise you as his own. Felix's father has never stopped regretting his decision. He's spent his whole life trying to be a good man, which is why he became a teacher and why he raised Felix to be so kind and generous. I've watched him at family gatherings for years, seeing how he looks at you with such sadness and pride. He wanted to tell you the truth so many times, but he was afraid it would hurt you or confuse you. I'm telling you now because I want you to know that the kindness you both share isn't a coincidence. It's in your blood. You and Felix are both caring people because you come from Amen, who learned from his mistakes and spent his life trying to help others. Felix was crying now. My dad. He always asked about you at family gatherings. He always seemed so interested in how you were doing. I thought he was just being polite. I thought about Felix's father, Mr. Morrison. He was a quiet man who taught high school history and coached the debate team. At family gatherings, he always seemed a little sad, a little distant from the others. Now I understood why. "The way he looked at me sometimes," I said slowly, "like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words." "He was probably terrified," Felix said. "Imagine carrying that secret for so long." I picked up the letter and continued reading. "There's more you should know. Your biological mother didn't abandon you. She died in the car crash with your stepfather when you were 8. She loved you completely and never regretted her choice to keep you and raise you with a good man. Felix's father has been sending money for your care all these years, but he did it through me so you wouldn't know. He paid for your school clothes, your books, even part of your college tuition. He never wanted you to struggle, even though he couldn't be your father openly." Tears were streaming down my face. All those times when Grandma Iris seemed to have extra money for things I needed, it had been him. Felix's father had been taking care of me from a distance my whole life. "What do we do now?" Felix asked. I looked at my brother, my actual brother, who had been the only one in our family to show me real kindness when I needed it most. It all made sense now. The way we understood each other, the way we both cared about helping people, the way we worked together so naturally. "We go talk to our father," I said. That evening, we drove to Mr. Morrison's house. He lived in a small, neat home filled with books and pictures of his students. When he opened the door and saw us both standing there, he knew immediately why we'd come. You found out, he said quietly. Grandma Iris left us a letter. Felix said. Mr. Morrison, our father, invited us in and made tea with shaking hands. We sat in his living room surrounded by years of silence and secrets. I've wanted to tell you for so long, he said to me, his voice breaking, but I was terrified that you'd hate me for giving you up. I could never hate you, I said. You've been taking care of me my whole life, even when I didn't know it. You were so young when I made that mistake. I was scared and stupid, and I let fear make my decisions for me. But you spent your whole life trying to make up for it, Felix said. You became a teacher. You helped thousands of kids. You raised me to care about others. And you secretly supported me through Grandma Iris, I added. You never stopped being my father. You just did it quietly. Mr. Morrison was crying now. I've been so proud of both of you, watching you build the community center together, seeing how you help people. I knew you'd found each other in the way that mattered most. We're family, I said simply. We've always been family. Now we just know the whole truth. Over the next few hours, he told us stories about our biological mother and the early days when he was too young and scared to make good choices. He showed us pictures and letters that filled in the missing pieces of our family history. There's something else, he said eventually. Something I've been saving for 30 years. He went to his bedroom and came back with a small wooden box. Inside were baby pictures of me, a lock of hair from my first haircut, and a letter my biological mother had written before she died. To my daughter Marlo, if you're reading this, then you've learned the truth about your birth father. I want you to know that giving you up was the hardest decision I ever made, but I knew he was a good man who would regret his choice and spend his life trying to make up for it. I also want you to know that I kept you because I couldn't bear to give you to strangers. Your stepfather was a wonderful man who loved you from the moment he met you. You were blessed with two fathers who loved you completely. I hope someday you and your half-brother will find each other and build something beautiful together. You both have good hearts, and good hearts always find their way to each other. She had known. Somehow my biological mother had known that Felix and I would end up working together to help people. She was right, Felix said, reading the letter over my shoulder. We did find each other, and we did build something beautiful together. As we sat there in our father's living room, looking through decades of hidden love and secret support, I realized that Grandma Iris's final gift wasn't just the truth about our relationship. It was the understanding that family isn't just about blood or money or showing off. It's about people who lift each other up, who help each other grow, who work together to make the world better. So what happens now? Our father asked. Now we're a family, I said. All of us together. No more secrets, no more hiding. And we keep building community centers, Felix added. We keep helping people and honoring the values you taught us. Both of you taught us, I corrected, thinking about my stepfather who had raised me and my biological father who had supported me from afar. As we hugged goodbye that night, I felt something I'd never experienced before. The complete, perfect sense of belonging to a family that truly understood what love meant. The next morning, Felix and I stood in the community center garden where our parents had met decades ago. Families were having breakfast together in the shared kitchen. Children were getting ready for school with help from volunteer tutors. Seniors were gathering for their morning exercise class. You know what the best part is? I said to my brother. What? We're not just running a community center. We're living. Proof that Grandma Iris was right about everything. How so? She said that real wealth comes from lifting others up. She said that family means caring for each other no matter what. She said that people can change their hearts through service. I gestured at the busy, happy scene around us. Look at all of this. This is what happens when people choose love over money. Felix smiled. And this is just the beginning. We're going to build more centers, help more families, create more opportunities for people to discover what really matters. I thought about that dinner table 3 years ago when my cousins had called me the poor own, and I'd almost shown them the real estate contract just to prove them wrong. I was so glad I hadn't. Because waiting, enduring their cruelty, and following, Grandma Iris's plan had led me to something infinitely more valuable than their respect or envy. It had led me to my real family. It had led me to my life's purpose. It had led me to understand that being called the poor one was actually the greatest compliment they could have given me. Because I was poor in all the things that didn't matter: expensive clothes, fancy cars, status symbols, and I was rich in all the things that did matter: love, purpose, family, and the joy that comes from helping others build better lives. The real estate contract that started it all was now framed on my office wall, next to pictures of the families we'd helped and a quote from Grandma Iris: "Real wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give away." Every day, as I walked through our thriving community center and saw the difference we were making in hundreds of lives, I knew she was absolutely right. My cousins had called me the poor one, but I had shown them something more valuable than any contract. I had shown them what it meant to be truly rich. And that's how I learned that real wealth isn't about money. It's about the love you give and the kindness you show to others. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from around the world. Are you Team Marlo, or do you think her cousins deserved another chance? If this story touched your heart and reminded you that kindness always wins, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you're helping us spread more stories about love, family, and the power of choosing kindness over cruelty. And don't forget to click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another amazing story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for listening, and remember, true wealth comes from lifting others up, not putting them down.